Thank you for joining me. This is a program about custody disputes during the pandemic. It's too bad that we have to talk about a topic like this, but in this challenging time, the best of people sometimes does not come out. The problems that we're dealing with are parents who live in different places but have to share custody and therefore travel to do these exchanges. Another problem is where children are isolated or quarantined due to the virus. And then finally, there's just generalized concerns about exposure to the virus that could happen with these custody exchanges taking place. And we're going to work through each one of these issues. First, just a little bit about my background. I'm a California family law specialist. I've been practicing 26 years. I'm a member of Walzer Melcher, which is a 7-lawyer firm that just handles divorce and other family law matters. And we do complex, high-stakes family law litigation. Now, in custody, everyone's equal. It doesn't matter what their background is or how much money they make or don't make. All these problems are the same for every family. Now, we do have significant safety concerns about travel and custody exchanges. That is inevitable. Everyone's concerned about the virus. They don't want to spread it. They don't want to get it. And we're all learning this together and going through this. And the rules are kind of out the window in some respects. And courts are really unable to help in many respects because they're also going through a crisis, and it's very limited, the access that we have right now to courts. Now, some people, unfortunately, are going to use the virus as an excuse to withhold custody. And even those with an honest belief that there's a concern could be blamed that they're playing games with custody. And without the courts really being open that much, what are we going to do for help? And that's what this program is about, just to kind of walk through on a practical level some of these problems. Now, the first thing to understand is that we cannot eliminate risk. All we can do is manage it. So when I'm dealing with clients, counseling them, I'm reminding them of this somewhat obvious fact, but there is nothing risk-free in life, that we're always going to have risk and we just have to manage and accept what we can. We want to think through the issues from all sides. It's easy for us to see it through our own lens, to feel it the way we feel it, but we also have to see it from the other side's perspective. What does the other co-parent want and think and believe, and what are their concerns? What about the child's lens? What about the court's perspective? So we got to think through this through all these different levels in order to get clarity and understand what the right outcome should be. But ultimately, we got to put our kids first. So that's always the touchstone. Whenever in doubt, when we're working through these issues, is that kids come first. Everything else is second. Now, the problem that we have here is conflicting orders. We have a custody order that's going to say the parenting plan and dates, times, and places for exchanges. But then we have, after the fact, these health orders that restrict our movement and require, if we've been in contact with this virus, to isolate or quarantine. And so which one do we follow? Now, there are some helpful tips here. One is when we have conflicting orders, we may look at what was the last order in time. So what was the last order to be made? Perhaps that one is the one to be followed rather than the earlier one. So in most cases, that would be the health order that would take precedence under this theory because it was made later than the custody order. Another rule is the specific orders always take precedence over general ones. So whatever specifically required of a party is going to take precedence over just some generalized order that applies to like maybe everyone. So that may help. Some of these health orders actually have exceptions for custody exchanges. So these people have thought through this issue and said that going out to exchange a child is an essential activity, and I agree with that. If going to the store is essential to get groceries, then certainly facilitating a exchange so a parent can see their child is also essential. So that's common sense, but some of them actually writ that in there. But sometimes there's going to be an order conflict. And so we may have a health order saying that this person is supposed to be isolated and cannot leave the house, but then they're also maybe subject to a custody order that says you shall leave the house and go do this exchange. So which one do you follow? So we're going to have to use some common sense on it. I think if somebody's isolated, they cannot leave, they are not allowed to leave, that would put other people at risk, including the child, if they went out to do this custody exchange. So common sense is going to have to prevail here. Now, what if we don't have that conflict, but we just have concerns about exposing ourselves or our child to this virus by doing the exchange? And that's a very difficult choice. Do we just defy this court order and say we're just not doing it because it's too risky? Or do we say we're going to go and comply with the order and hope that it's safe? Again, a very difficult choice to make. And I'm going to talk through some ways of making that decision. First of all, obviously, if you go to a lawyer, we have to advise you to follow orders. We cannot advise you not to do that. So please don't take this as any type of legal advice not to follow an order. So when we're working through this decision, first of all, we have to evaluate what the risks are. We have to identify what these risks are and weigh them. So first, there's a travel risk. If there's going to be an exchange, is it involve an airport, an airplane? Well, that would be pretty risky right now. Is it going to involve a place that has different health orders than the one that we're currently situated in? So is this other town or state have more restrictive health orders than the one we're in, and we have to go cross that boundary to do the exchange and maybe be subject to a quarantine? Like, for example, in Hawaii, if you were to go there right now, you would be subject to a 14-day quarantine. And so that wouldn't really work for an exchange if there was that kind of travel ban. What other particular risks are there for the exchange? What is the health of the other parent? If they have the virus or they quarantined, isolated? What about other members of their household? We've also seen people raise concerns about occupations. That somebody is in a high-risk occupation for getting the virus and they don't want to do the exchange. So we have to think about those. Here's the part that people always forget, and is you got to compare your own risk. It's very easy to think about the other household and imagine all the ways that this child could be exposed to the virus without any concern or thought given to what their own household is. So how does your own household compare? What are the risks that you have when you're going out to the store, going out in public, of bringing the virus into your household or giving it to your child compared to the others? So people shouldn't think that they're somehow, immune from this, unless maybe you had the virus before and you have antibodies for it. Unless we know that, why are you immune? Why is your household so special or different than this other household? So I encourage you to kind of think through those issues before just saying, oh, it's too risky for the child to go to the other household. Now, if we have a child who's specifically at risk, or a parent who's specifically at risk, because of other health concerns, then that's different. We really, really can't take any chances there. So again, that's just one thing to go into the mix. Now, we have this concept in law called force majeure. It's a French term. It's been around forever. But if somebody is obligated to do something, but they're prevented from performing or delayed from performing because of some irresistible superhuman cause, then their performance is excused. And that comes right from our Civil Code, Section 1511 in California. Superhuman cause prevents or delays performance. So if you can't do something, then the law doesn't require you to do it. But we're really talking about being prevented from doing it, not that it's inconvenient to do it. Now, if there is an order and it is violated, or the other party believes that it's violated, they can ask that you be held in contempt of court, and that's a criminal proceeding, very serious. But to convict for contempt, there has to be a willful violation of a court order. So not the mere fact that the order was not followed, but that a valid order was made and that the party willfully violated it. Now, if compliance was not possible due to these health conditions, then it would not be, in my opinion, a willful violation, because you cannot do what you cannot do. If it's impossible to comply with the order, you're not going to be in contempt with it. But again, impossible is a very strong word, and I would read that literally, not as inconvenient. Now, if we can't comply faithfully to the words of the order, we do want to comply with the intention of it. Now, when these orders were made, nobody was thinking about a pandemic. So all these plans that were made were now being undone by what's happening to all of us. But if the order said 50-50 custody, equal custody, you got to make that happen. You got to find a way to make that happen. Follow the intent of it. Now, maybe that's going to be through some Zoom meetings with the other parent, or maybe altering days or something like that, but you want to do your best to follow the intent of it. Now, ultimately, there's going to be some disputes where we can't resolve, and we're going to have to go to court, but just keep in mind the courts are also suffering their own crisis. They're limited operations. They're there only for true emergencies. And so if you have a true emergency, I would say like life and death type thing, you could go to court and get help. But if it's not life and death thing, I would think twice about asking. You can also ask for help from the police, but they're really going to try to resolve this through encouragement if they come out, not by taking somebody to jail, and also sends a horrible message to the child having the police come there called by one parent against the other. And then finally, we're going to looking at vacation time and makeup time right now. For LA schools, we're on spring break. And a lot of our custody plans have a spring break program where one parent would have the whole spring break. Well, what do we do about that now? What if that involves travel? Is there going to be a makeup time? What about custody plans that were designed around a child being in school full time and now the child's not in school? What do we do about that? Obviously, we want to work together as co-parents, hope that we can make that up. But, will the court really make up that time later? No, probably not. And you really can't make up time with a child. And you just have to be in that moment and do the best we can. And unfortunately, I wish I had better advice, but some of these things are just going to have to be worked out. And if they can't, the time is kind of lost. Now, when all else fails, we want to put our child first. So that has to be the top of mind for all of these decision points. We always want to use common sense and keep in mind that these are temporary disruptions that will not necessarily have permanent effects. Now, in conclusion, we want to talk these issues out with the other parent. We want to be able to have that relationship and talking it out. Now, if that's not possible, find somebody who is sensible and talk that issue out. Go through these risk analysis that I've done. If you can't resolve it, document what happened. And then eventually do bring it to the court's attention and hopefully get some help there. And then finally get some legal advice. There's lawyers who can help at no cost or even free cost. So I would encourage you to get some advice from an experienced lawyer before making any of these decisions. I hope this is helpful. Again, my name is Chris Melcher from Walzer Melcher in Los Angeles, California.